Welcome to Power Lunch Live. I'm Rhett Power, your host. Good to be with you here on in 2021 already. We took about a month off and got our first show was yesterday, so we're back on the air. It's good to be back with you. Now, the point of Power Lunch Live is to have today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, CEOs, leaders who are doing amazing work that we can all learn from, so that we can get better at what we do. So the fun part about the show is that it's interactive, or can be. The only way that happens is if you get on that keyboard and type a question, interact with our guests, ask questions, get to the things that you want to get to. That's why we're here. Now, we broadcast on LinkedIn Live, of course, and Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all those platforms. So we try to monitor those during the show, and they typically show up in our feed here. So please do ask your questions. If you like the program, give it a like or share so your network can benefit from from these conversations as well. Now, today is going to be, I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation. I've got Mike Poznansky. Mike is the founder and managing partner. Is it Neato?
Neato.
Neato. Okay.
Yeah, Neato.
I knew I was going to mess that up. So thanks for fixing that for me.
Sure.
And that's an agency focused on helping brands understand and connect with young audiences, particularly with a special focus on Gen Z and college students. You've worked with companies like Vans, Wall Street Journal, Spotify, Boston University, just to help develop and implement strategies that help them achieve their objectives in terms of working with young people. You spent a lot of time at Red Bull, so that's you probably have some interesting stories from your time there. Probably maybe try to dig into that a little bit too, and how that sort of shaped the work that you're doing now, because
Absolutely.
that was certainly a product that focused on young people, and it probably really helped shape what you're doing now. So welcome to the show, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rhett. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, talk about the agency a little bit. Talk about the business. Talk about what you do and why you decided to sort of focus on young people and college students and in that particular market. Because I think, from a traditional standpoint, that's not a market. I know when I was in marketing and worked at agencies early in my career, we were always told, well, that market doesn't have any money, right? That market
Right.
doesn't. They don't. We don't pay attention to that market because they don't vote. They don't buy. They don't. They don't have any money. So we focus on the 30 to 50-year-old that's spending money on product and consumer goods.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
believe it, though.
Well, it's a good point. I think the why college is an interesting question, and that has evolved over time, right? And
Mhm.
most of my career has been focused on marketing to college students, even starting as a student brand manager myself when I was working for Red Bull as a senior in college. So it's really coming of age for a U.S. consumer, right? It's the first time you're out of the home. It's the first time you're filling your own grocery basket. You're decorating your own place, and you are starting to make decisions and form habits and rituals that are going to shape and influence some of the behaviors that you'll have for the rest of your life.
Okay.
We also saw a few years ago, it's been kind of interesting, where young people are much more plugged in than their parents, right? So there's this sphere of influence that's really interesting with college students and young people in general, where mom and dad are going to them saying, like, I need help buying a computer, or, hey, we're trying to figure out where to stay when we go down to Brazil. Can you find me some cool places to go to eat? Because they're
What's this
so plugged
Airbnb
in.
thing? Yeah. What's this
Yeah.
Airbnb thing? Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting. And then in college itself in the US is also really unique, right? You have tens of thousands of people in a shared space and a shared mindset, all in these new beginnings, which from a cultural perspective is really fascinating. And then they're going to go out in the real world, back to these big cities, and really at that point, they're going to have some beliefs, rituals, behaviors, and loyalties that are going to influence them as they start to spend that money that they earn.
Right.
Yeah.
Where are kids? I mean, where are I say kids? I mean, I have a almost a college age son, so
Right.
that's where my head is. But where are they spending money? And our brands, what are brands doing now to sort of take that into consideration and sort of rethink how they approach that market?
Yeah, it's a really fascinating question. I'd say the first thing we have to ask is what are they prioritizing? And they're investing in themselves. And
Okay.
that could be through experiences or through self-care, but finding their needs and making sure they're serving them. In terms of what brands are doing to capitalize on that, it's I don't know. It's right now it's middle of January 2021, right? So current days the world has changed quite a bit, and I think some of the brands that are doing a really good job are ones that are helping them take good care of themselves and understanding what their needs are. So good example could be, in terms of where people are spending money, you could see the Pelotons of the world, health and fitness brands, right? People are struggling a bit with their mental health. They want to elevate their physical health. They're spending a little bit time being more sedentary than they'd like to. People are spending more time in the outdoors. So I don't necessarily know if that's a result of what the brands are doing or necessarily a shift in consumer behavior that certain categories have been able to capitalize on.
What brands do young people like or appreciate, do you think?
Brands
What
that care.
what are the brands that are doing that well? Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Peloton, but what are some of the other brands that are sort of get that marketing towards Gen Z and younger markets?
Yeah. Honestly, for me, what it really comes down to is I think brands that are doing well are brands that care and ones that are making an impact. So if I start just listing brands, some of them may sound a little bit cookie cutter, what you're going to see on the top 10 marketers of 2021 list. But I think the real differentiator is brands that are focusing on making an impact, right? So if you look at Apple, and especially recently, Apple's diversity initiative, um, even some of the things that Apple's doing around technology to make sure that people have a healthier relationship with technology, to make sure that their privacy is being protected. If you look at Patagonia, Patagonia's had some pretty bold and courageous campaigns lately and has not been shy at all about speaking to their values, right? So I think really what differentiates brands that are doing well with brands that are Gen Z are brands that are invested and that are not just saying but are doing.
Okay, so with a purpose, maybe even have a purpose. I mean, to me, it makes sense. I mean, even me, I've changed my habits. I think over the last 10 years to really pay attention to what companies are doing and saying, and some of their actions, right? And I think, I know that there are companies I won't spend money in because their CEO. I mean, I know what their CEO, who he is or she is, and what they've done, and some of the things I disagree with fundamentally. So I can't I can't I can't spend money in those companies. So I know that that's got to be something you take into consideration when you're as a brand. Now you've got to think about what your purpose is and what what your actions are. Um,
Sure.
you talk about Gen Z and digital fatigue in the era of Zoom. What do you mean by that?
Do you
I,
mind? Do you mind? I actually think this purpose thing is really fascinating. Do you mind if we just spend another minute talking about that?
absolutely, please
Okay.
do.
All right. So I'd say several years ago, we saw a little bit of a shift where young people's confidence in government and formal institutions started to wane. Everyone's confidence
Yeah,
started to wane, right? And
yeah,
so they were looking for brands to fill that void. And at the time, you saw a lot of brands kind of focus inward and say, how could we take how could we take our positioning statement and make it a little bit less business driven and make it a little bit more meaningful and impactful? And then you had brands stepping up and making statements around things, right? We saw that with gay rights, right, with Oreo, and that was a massive moment. That was a huge deal. Fast forward to now, it's like the stakes have changed, right? So,
big time.
right. So there there's a lot going on in the world, right? And there are a lot of these causes that are really near and dear to young people's hearts. And I'd say where purpose before for a brand was all about how could we do things that are a little bit more meaningful around our mission. It's kind of transitioned now to say, like, how are you going to use your brand and your resources and your leverage and your power to positively impact the world or positively impact my life? And you brought up values, which I think is right, saying like I want to support a brand who has values that align with mine. But now it's like it's getting much more substantive, right? It's real. And we were talking with some activists, younger activists, and really we were one of our clients is going to do some work supporting some efforts that activists have in their communities. And it was really important for us to understand how to do that the right way. And we knew there was some skepticism with activists and brands because they said, I don't want to just be a token activist. I don't want you to just come in and try and sponsor what I'm doing and put your logo on it so you could feel good about yourself. Anyways, they brought up this example, one we were talking to in Chicago. And he said it was a really large bank came to him and said, we want to give $1 billion to the Black community. And here's our whole marketing campaign, and here's our messaging campaign, and we'd like for you to come on board with us. Are you on? And he asked some really great questions. He just said, what are you going to do with that money? How are you going to make sure it's having an impact? Do we need to talk about it now? Do you need to talk about it now? Can we wait and see if what the most effective way to utilize this investment is? Because it's a lot of money. And then maybe down the road, we could start talking about it. So there's almost this like inverse correlation between the amount brands talk about what they want to do or what they are doing versus making a true meaningful impact with what they're doing. And I'd say what really matters to this generation and what the world needs are people filling that latter bucket. By all means, talk about it, but lead with your actions. And ideally, you do something so meaningful and powerful and effective, someone else will talk about it on your behalf.
I almost feel like great point. I mean, I almost feel like I always remember my mother-in-law, and I've always had a political opinion this way or another, and I won't get into that. But I remember my mother-in-law saying when I first started my company, she's like, you don't put a yard sign. She was a longtime business owner.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, I never put a yard sign in my window, and I never, people might know where I stand, but I don't advertise it. I'm when you're in business, you have to sort of walk that middle road, right? And I almost think we're way past that now, right? You almost have to say, this is where we stand on this issue. Mm-hmm. This is who you look at Nike, right? And they were very clear about, to me anyway, where they stood on Black Lives Matter and where they stood on, with Colin Kaepernick in kneeling. So is that, do you get the sense that really now the brands are going to have to, you just can't walk the middle line now. You have to take a side on these social justice issues, the Black Lives. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, because if you look at some of the issues out there, they're a little bit polarizing, right? And a
Yeah,
little bit.
you're breaking up a little bit.
Can you hear me? Okay.
A little static. Getting a little static, but go ahead. Let's see if that's better.
Nope.
Got you back.
Any good?
That's better. Yeah, there you go. Go ahead.
How's this?
That's perfect.
Okay. I just can't hear you.
Okay.
One sec.
Okay, so we'll come back to Mike. We're having a little technical difficulty there. We'll get back to that conversation in just a minute. But I think what Mike is saying and what we're talking about here is really important because I think we are at this stage now where we have to make a choice as business leaders, and I think we've got Mike back. There you go. I think we're. Can you hear me, Mike?
Yeah, it's actually it's a little bit staticky on my side. Can you hear me?
You're clear on this side.
Okay. One sec. Sorry, Rhett.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, like we were saying, I think we're at this stage now where you have to make a decision, you have to make a choice, and I think that's where we just are as business leaders. I'm going to go ahead and close out the show, and we'll pick up next week, next Tuesday at noon Eastern Standard Time. And I thank you for being on the Power Lunch today. Sorry we had some technical issues on that side, but thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.